After all the hype that you've heard over the course of the last 2 years about the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management, we're proud to announce our new venture, the Women of Conservation calendar that showcases and celebrates the women that helped defeat Proposition 127. 14 months of the calendar of all of the women that helped, plus more, the convention dates, deadlines, draw application dates, commission meetings, and things going on at the Colorado State Capitol. This is an opportunity to support CRWM and the efforts that we continually work on through the Colorado State Capitol, Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission, and to address all of the ballot issues that continually arise. We've got some fantastic sponsors that help prop up and just showcase who these women are. Rodeo queens, barrel racers, houndswomen, general sportsmen, mothers, and every avocation you could think, from archery hunting to muzzleloading to rifle hunting and waterfowl as well. These women stuck their necks out to help save the hunt. Get it for yourself. It makes a great gift. Make sure you get it before Christmas, and look at all the other important dates that are coming up. $24.95, SaveTheHuntColorado.com. If you're looking to explore your opportunities to hunt out west, maybe try Colorado. If you're trying to get information about bighorn sheep, elk, deer, private land, public land, maybe it's everything that you want to do as far as pack-in trips. Maybe it's just having a pack trip decided for you, and then when you get there, you just hunt out of a drop camp. Make sure you check out the Colorado Outfitters Association. Colorado Outfitters Association here in the state of Colorado has got a numerous amount of outfitters that are members, and they can supply you with whatever you're looking to try to acquire and what you want to do for the hunt of a lifetime. For more information, check out the ColoradoOutfitters.org, and make sure that you let them know that you heard about them with Through the Gates, and let them know that you're trying to continue to save the hunt in the state of Colorado. We always talk about supporting businesses that support our efforts to be able to save the hunt in Colorado. Well, the Colorado Shed Company in Penrose, Colorado, just outside Canyon City, is one of those partners. Colorado Shed has been building sheds in the state of Colorado for the last 10 years and is actually owned by sportsmen and women. They support the efforts of what the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management has done, and they also support all the organizations that you're probably a member of. Whether you're looking for small modular type buildings, sheds for your property to store the extra hunting equipment, or maybe just to turn around and put that freezer in for all the meat that you've got, check out Colorado Sheds. They also do pole barns and can do custom manufacturing to whatever your heart desires. She sheds, man caves, it doesn't matter. Check out coloradosheds.com. Through the Gates is produced under the support of the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's our mission. We're engaged in fighting at every level so that wildlife management remains science-based and conservation continues to work for our wildlife. To learn more and join the movement, visit SaveTheHuntColorado.com. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the greatest conservation model in the world. It's a success story that should be shared and celebrated because everybody is a part of it. Well, we got another episode of Through the Gates to Save the Hunt. It's just an update and give you guys a little bit of a synopsis of what's been going on and what will go on over the course of the next several weeks. We are in the first stages of November, and a lot of things coming up. We've got the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting coming up on November 13th and 14th in Sterling, Colorado. And used to be they would set those Eastern Plains dates to where people could engage in hunting activities, commissioners and elected and appointed officials. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore because there's not any hunters or any meat eaters on the commission to any significant numbers. We do have Commissioner Silva Blaney and Commissioner Gabe Otero and Commissioner Murphy Robinson, which are all great commissioners, but the overwhelming majority of the commissioners and like-minded individuals don't participate in those sort of activities anymore. A lot of them don't even eat meat, which is their prerogative, but kind of seems a little different than what we've been used to, where you didn't have vegans and vegetarians making decisions on game regulations about a variety of different things, including 78 game species. So, yeah, the commission meeting coming up, there'll be a lot of things. The agenda has not been set as of yet, but it will be by the time that this airs. So we would encourage you to go to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission website and look at the agenda. And by the time this airs, that agenda will be up and running. So who knows what they're going to put on it. But we have a pretty good idea. Some of it will pertain to Chapter 11, which is open for final review of regulatory changes to implement Senate Bill 25053, which is including rules differentiating between wild bison as big game and domestic bison, the future regulated hunting of wild bison, and the payment of compensation for damage caused by wild bison. So that'll be one of the issues. Some fishing things will be brought up, and the wild turkey. Then they're going to be discussing some big game stuff out of Chapter 2, and that's open for the entire review of the chapter, which includes annual changes to season dates, limited licenses areas, and manner of take provisions for deer, elk, pronghorn antelope, moose, bighorn sheep, mountain goat, mountain lion, and bear. Annual changes are limited to license application and drawing processes. And then they've got the damage caused by wildlife, which is under Chapter 17, and that's open for review of regulatory changes to implement Senate Bill 24171, which was the restoration of Wolverines back in 2024 that the Colorado General Assembly undertook, and it's specifically in relation to game damage regulations pertaining to Wolverines once they go through the hoops and the hurdles that are necessary to be able to implement that process, which they started back in 2024. I also wanted to talk about just a little bit. We're entering the final stage of the fur bearer regulation stakeholder process to see if there's a need for any changes. And while we've had this conversation ongoing for about the last 5.5 or 6 months with two different sectors of a focus group, one from the proponents of change, they call themselves advocates, but I guess we're all advocates, but I don't like the differentiation that they're advocates and sportsmen and women and cattlemen and ag producers are not. But that meeting is on Thursday, November 6th, and that'll be the final meeting before recommendations are actually compiled by the peak facilitators, Heather Bergman, and then that information is submitted to Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and then it'll be reviewed by staff and then synthesized and then eventually presented to the commission, Parks and Wildlife Commission, on if there's any need for changes, if there's any questions about management objectives or theories on how fur bearers, 16 species of fur bearers, because if you remember what I've been talking about, beavers have been kicked aside in their own working group. So 16 species of fur bearers will be addressed in some capacity. I and Jenny Burby and Cody Lostro with the United Houndsman Association and Chris Journey with the Colorado Conservation Alliance and Aaron Spar and others are intimately involved in this process and addressing things, attempting to address things from a science-based perspective and not so much stay status quo, but let the experts decide how we should do this. And this is what we've been professing all along. Now, if you listen to our opponents on different things, they don't want to call ourselves advocates and they don't want to call Colorado Parks and Wildlife experts. And while there might be a ton of things going around about, Colorado Parks and Wildlife should do this and Colorado Parks and Wildlife should do that, I continually go back to the well and say I would much rather have the ability to be able to work with Colorado Parks and Wildlife based upon the studies and the data and the objectives and models that they come up with for our wildlife resources and species. Now, that being said, our opponents of these measures that just don't want us to harvest anything, they don't think that Colorado Parks and Wildlife should be placating, I guess, to sportsmen and women. It's not that they're placating the sportsmen and women. The sportsmen and women do fund the overwhelming majority of all wildlife resources in the state of Colorado. However, there's times when Colorado Parks and Wildlife has either extended seasons or objectives or models, or they've backed off on seasons or objectives or models, and they've looked at specific areas because of things pertaining to drought or inclement weather or predation or disease. And that's what they do. They don't look at things as an individual animal basis, and they don't look at things as an individual problem
and say we're just going to shut everything off, or we're just going to go willy-nilly and we're going to turn around and go kill everything. What they do is a thoughtfully minded process to address all of the components of an inner working system, whether you call it ecosystem or biodiversity, that's your own preference. But this inner working system, and have to be considerate of all the nuances that go into this entire process, which includes landowners. And as you know, the ag community, I was going to say company, but the ag community has had to deal with this stuff on a variety of different levels, and they just keep getting handed a bill of sale or a bill of goods for their ability to be able to operate in a functional manner, especially when you have a gubernatorial administration agenda of what like we've had over the course of the last 7 some odd years in the state of Colorado. Wolves have played an intricate part of that. You know, if mountain lions were banned from the harvest last year in Proposition 127, and they weren't considered a game animal, the underlying element of that entire process would be that game damage claims could not have been paid to the ag producers because they would not be classified as a big game animal anymore. And so while it just looks like on the surface that somebody wants to ban this and somebody wants to stop that and somebody wants to restrict this, there's a lot of caveats that go on behind the scenes about statutory regulations, about constitutional amendments, about personal property rights, about the ability to be able to manage wildlife, about the opportunity for Colorado Parks and Wildlife to work with legitimate stakeholders that have skin in the game and boots on the ground experience, although some of it might be anecdotal. When somebody's lived on the property for the last 45 years and has had to deal with a variety of different things, I think that they carry more value than an emotional perspective of an individual that lives in Denver that can't identify what counties are counties and doesn't know what we actually have to work with when it comes to our wildlife and natural resources and water and air quality and recreation. They just look at it from their perspective. Players on both sides of the spectrum, whether you call them extremists or they call themselves advocates or we call ourselves sportsmen or conservationists, when you look at what we have in line and what we're trying to accomplish, it falls into the same ideologies of an emotional, social component. However, when people live and eat and breathe and sleep the aspects of what we're discussing, it gives them a little bit more opportunity to say, with all due respect, I understand your opinion, but you don't understand my life and you don't understand what it takes for me to be able to turn around and harbor 300 elk on my property, or to deal with beavers that are damming up my irrigation ditch when the guy down below me has more water shares and he wants to turn around and take me to water court. Or it's in the fall and that beaver problem becomes an issue to where are you going to take that beaver without causing imminent damage or maybe just immediate death for that beaver because they haven't had a chance to build up their food cache. They haven't had a chance to turn around and establish territory. They haven't built a lodge or a bank den. And the ranchers and the farmers, for the most part, over the course of time that I've dealt with, have attempted to try to deal with wildlife in an individual set of circumstances. Not individual lives of animals, but individual set of circumstances. And a lot of it has been live and let live until you get to a point to where I can't live with what you're doing anymore. Now, people that I've dealt with on the opposite side of the aisle think that you ought to be able to just take whatever it is, whatever animal, whether it has a name or whether it doesn't have a name, and relocate it or translocate it. And if you look up the difference between relocation and translocation, you'll get where I'm coming from. There's a difference between management of an existing species and a restoration, like what we're attempting to going to be doing on Wolverines or what we've already done with voter approval on wolves back in 2020. Now, I don't want to get into the nuances and the backdoor he said, she said, woulda, shoulda, coulda philosophy. But I can tell you that if you listen to enough meetings and if you see what is being attempted to be done at the Colorado General Assembly this coming year, you'll get an idea where I'm going on this. And I would encourage each and every one of you to pay particular attention. And if you're not interested in one subject matter, try to put things together to where you can see just what's actually happening on the landscape. A lot of times I call people out, sometimes to the pleasure of some and the chagrins of others. But when it comes down to it and what we're trying to accomplish on the Fur Bearer Working Group or Focus Group or whatever you want to call it, or the Beaver Focus Group, that is a statewide opportunity for people to engage, and that's almost being ready to be distributed to the public for public comment. That same process will take place over the course of the next 4 to 6 months in trying to establish a beaver management plan, a statewide beaver management plan. I've been harvesting beavers for the better part of my adult life in some capacity. Some of it's been on nuisance. Some of it's been on damage type stuff. Some of it's been for human health and safety. Some of it's been for avocation. Avocation, for those that don't know, is what the antis would consider recreation. I think that you can look at an individual animal and probably judge your opinion that it's more like a Bambi effect. But I think that if you look at an individual species and realizing that fur bearers in the state of Colorado have not only been adequately managed because there's a plethora and they're very plentiful of the 16 or 17 species, depending on if you throw beavers in there or not, you can look at and see just what Colorado Parks and Wildlife has allowed to happen because it was scientifically justified, or what they've actually backpedaled on because it was scientifically justified. Not because of an emotional component, not because I don't want you to do this, not because I think that you should live the way that I want you to live, but because they do things from an individual species perspective. And while they might look at one individual species, they also take into consideration all the other species that surround that, whether it's, let's just put swift fox on the table. You got black-footed ferrets that now have been a threatened and endangered species, now been reintroduced and translocated to different areas of the state. I don't have a problem with any of that. But you look at burrowing owls, and you look at badgers, and you look at coyotes, and you look at rattlesnakes and prairie dogs, and all the stuff that depend on that prairie grass ecosystem. One should not trump another. One should not be pedestalized over another. Some take preferential treatment for a variety of different reasons to reestablish or enhance the populations. But to turn around and say that this is more important than that, and you shouldn't do any of this over here because it might jeopardize that, is man playing with opinions and emotions that are not scientifically driven. Now, my adversaries can come up with a variety of different studies, a lot of which they've completed themselves, and come up with the process and procedures that they think is going to be beneficial straight across the board by addressing one particular species that's going to solve all components of a prairie management system, or maybe it's a subalpine system, or whatever it might be. They think that if you turn around and bring one animal in and you pay individual attention to individual animals, that you're going to solve the problems of all of those animals and the species related to those animals in a manner that is probably going to be justified on their part, but it's not going to be justified on the science-based side of things when it comes to trying to take into consideration all the components of what I previously mentioned about landowners and about depredation and damage and disease and climate change and drought and all the stuff. Wildlife management is adaptive. What I would encourage each and every one of you to do and look at a historical perspective, and I'm going to start quoting some of these things over the course of the next 6 or 7 Through the Gates updates. We got some fabulous guests coming out over the course of the next several weeks, and we've had some really good guests on the podcast. But I'm going to start quoting some things that came out of a specific book, and it's called Colorado's Wildlife Story. And it was done by the Colorado Division of Wildlife for the 100th anniversary, and they're approaching 127 years now, I believe, 126 years. But the Colorado Wildlife Story, done by Pete Barrows and Judith Holmes, is a compilation of information from the inception of Colorado Parks and Wildlife all the way up essentially until present day, except for the last 25 years. But a lot of it still carries over and is part of the Colorado wildlife story that Colorado Parks and Wildlife sportsmen and women and adversaries of sportsmen and women and the ag community continually deal with on a regular basis. Chapter 13 of the Colorado wildlife story is about fur bearers and predators, and it specifically highlights beaver, badger, and bears. And over the course of the next several weeks, I'm going to continually give some of these updates pertaining to what's going on at the legislature and what's going on with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission and what we're doing on working groups and how things are formulated. I'll be quoting some of the things and give you some things about early beaver laws and about the game wardens that were trappers, that they actually did most of the trapping and most of the translocation of populations all the way back to the John Hart eras of the early 1900s. I would encourage you to pay attention to things that you see in the news and don't just cast it aside. Disease is an issue that trappers and fur harvesters and wildlife managers address. People addressing individual animals don't address disease. They don't address population densities because they're concerned about a animal. Jerry Abker, back in the day in 2019, the former carnivore fur bearer biologist for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, made a comment in a public presentation that he was not worried about the individual blade of grass on a very pristine, well-manicured lawn or landscape. He was worried about the entire lawn, the entire field. He wasn't worried about that one yellow blade of grass or a little patch of yellow over on the side. He said if he was worried about that, he would be blinded by not seeing what was going on with all the other species of grasses or the other surrounding landscape. And I think that those are statements that I, as a conservation-minded hunter, trapper, sportsman, can understand, because when we take an individual deer or elk or antelope or sandhill crane or muskrat or coyote out, we know that other ones are going to benefit because of the proper management techniques of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which I know that a lot of you will agree with on times and disagree with. But what I would ask you to do is don't just pay attention to the debacle on wolves. While CPW has had trials and tribulations to be able to turn around and deal with that, it's not been in their control since the beginning. Not in their control at all. Going all the way back to 1982, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commissioner, the Division of Wildlife at the time, ruled against reintroduction of gray timber wolf or grizzly bears. But other states have elected to bring them back. Mountain lions are given complete protection in some states. Blackbird, crow, and raven were protected in Colorado in the late 1800s because they were insectivorous and worked wonders on cultivating fields. In the 1940s, a full-time department position was created to destroy predatory birds like crows and magpies because they depredated migratory waterfowl nests. The beaver could have easily gone away of the grizzly and the wolf had it not been for the luxurious fur and uncanny dam building abilities. These are statements out of that quote of chapter 13. We don't have an extirpation of beavers. We don't have a dropping population of beavers. Is it what it was back in 1820? No. Is it likely what it was in the 1600s? No. Have human population presented challenges for beavers and fur bearers and all wildlife species as a whole? Yes. But I don't know what the solution is unless you're going to turn around and try to get rid of 6 million people and 84 million visitors in the state of Colorado. We are stewards of our wildlife resources. We support the management objectives of agencies under the North American model to make the right decisions on behalf of wildlife and the people of the state of Colorado, whether they're sportsmen or women or not. And we will continue to stay steadfast and make sure that we become the voice, translated voice of the facts and the data and the statistics that are compiled through science-driven policies to make sure that 961 species of wildlife play hand in hand with each other while not pedestalizing one or bastardizing another or marginalizing any of it. We are part of the ecosystem, and as much as the animal rights extremists don't want us to be, we are here. They are here. And we have to figure out a way to continue to manage our wildlife resources in perpetuity over the course of the next 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 years, which will all be dead and gone by then. But what we establish now is on the shoulders of our forefathers, like Teddy Roosevelt, to make sure that what we have now is what we have at least then. And what we have now is more than what we had when Roosevelt started his campaign in the late 1890s and the early 1900s. In the meantime, follow us, subscribe, like, share, continually look at the new guests that were coming up, and we've got great big ventures on the horizon by completing our podcast studio, which might be up and running late November, December, depending on when we can formulate and get everything done. Make sure you follow the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. Get ready for the Colorado General Assembly that starts early January of 2026. Next year, the gubernatorial election is going to be a big talking point in the state of Colorado. Governor Polis is term limited, but there's going to be a hell of a lot of changes or attempted changes between now and then. Go to our website, SaveTheHuntColorado.com. The Women of Conservation calendar is out. It's getting significant reviews. We're selling it very well. It's distributed all around the state. If you want to buy one to help the cause and our lobbying efforts and making sure that we can continually try to fight a well-funded fight through the General Assembly, through the education campaigns, through the Colorado Parks and Wildlife representation, give us a donation. If you want to do a big donation, we've got a foundation, which is a C3. But the calendar is an easy way to keep in people's eyes through saturation and exposure. The Women of Conservation calendar. Go to SaveTheHuntColorado.com to get that. Email us, text us, whatever you want to talk about. There's a lot of good things happening on the landscape, and there's a lot of things we need to continually worry about and pay attention to. In the meantime, aim small, miss small, and stay the course.
If you want to support a company that supported the efforts to defeat Proposition 127, then you need to support Davis Tent. Davis Tent has provided quality canvas goods for outdoorsmen for the last 50-plus years. For more information, go to davistent.com. If you want to support another business that was instrumental in helping us defeat Proposition 127, check out Salida Gun Shop. Salida Gun Shop in Salida, Colorado provides quality products, expertise, and knowledge from individuals that actually do what they sell. Go to salidagunshop.com. Listen to the advice of Cameron Haynes and support companies that are supporting your cause and your efforts. Minturn Anglers is one of those companies. Minturn Anglers provides product and fishing excursions in Colorado and are second to none. For more information, go to minturnanglers.com.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Through the Gates. For more content like this, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels.